String rotation. Assume you have a method isSubstring which checks if one word is a substring of another. Given two strings of S1 and S2, write code to check if S2 is a rotation of S1 using only one call to isSubstring. For example, water bottle is a rotation of air bottle what? So if we break those strings down, we can see a pattern where there is a part of the first string that we can call x, and there is a part of both strings that we can call y as well. And so x and y are in both strings, and we are only rotating x and y. So in the first string, we should see x plus y, x like y concatenated to x, and in the second string we should see the other way around. So uh, what happens is that if we repeat one of the strings, we should be able to get to the other string. So if we repeat, for example in this case, the string 2, we will be able to create a substring of string 2 that contains string 1. If that was the case, then we can return true. So for our algorithm, I think first we should see whether both strings actually have the same length, since if both strings are not the same length, they are not probably a rotation of each other either. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. Then we are going to create the larger string and then see if we can find string 1 in that. And if we found that, we will return true. Otherwise, we will default to false. Uh, so now we have to use isSubstring, and we are only limited to calling it once. So I'm assuming that there is a method on the string class in Java called isSubstring, which returns a boolean. So I'm now thinking of whether um, I'm now thinking of whether that exists or not. So first, let's not worry about that. Let's pseudocode what we know so far. So our console is working, and now let's create a function that returns a boolean and is called isRotation, and it takes two strings as an input. So I also wanted to mention that uh, it doesn't matter which string we choose as string 1 and which one we choose as string 2, because this pattern would work on both of the strings. So yeah, if we repeat each of the strings, we should be able to have a substring that has the other string in it. And for the big O complexity, I'm not sure yet, but I would say if substring exists, it would be O of log n. So I would say the big O runtime of the whole function would be log n, but we'll have to see. So first, if the lengths were equal, we want to return false immediately. Otherwise, we will create that larger string and then figure out whether string 1 is inside that larger string. So, and after that, if it was, we will return true. Otherwise, we'll default to returning false. Um, so now I'm researching whether to see whether string 2 actually exists. Like, sorry, isSubstring method actually is a thing in Java. So here I'm not seeing anything called isSubstring which returns a boolean, and yeah, all the methods are actually the substring method itself, which returns a string, not a boolean. So now I found something on Stack Overflow which says which actually somebody asked the same question on Stack Overflow as kind of a fun activity for others to answer. And actually, I can say that I almost cheated. I didn't memorize what was on the screen, but uh, it was kind of similar to the one that we will do eventually to answer this question. There are a lot of tweaks that I will do to this code later on, since this is only to check whether a string is a substring of another one, but ours is actually to see whether string 1 is a substring of another string's like larger format, larger version. So let's see. So suppose we have these two strings and we have these two pointers for our loops. Now, to iterate through these strings. Now, we will check each character in both strings and we will count the number of matches that we get. So we will count with the larger string, and as soon as we hit a case where there is a match, we will start iterating in the other string as well, and we will count how many times we found a match and the length of the shorter string, or the string 1 in our case. And if they were equal, we will return true. So I'm now pseudocoding what I just said so that we don't get lost while coding. Alright, good. Now let's create our loops. But before that, let's store the sizes of our strings somewhere beforehand. So now I'm creating our loop for the larger string, or rather for the string 1. And now I'm creating a variable called match count. I think I should initialize it to 0 and store it outside both loops. And after that, as soon as I find a match, I will increment the number of match counts. And as soon as the number of match counts is equal to the length of string 1, we will return true. So now I'm getting false, even though this had to return true. So I'm trying to figure out where did that false came from. So I want to know. Okay, so we didn't even go in the loops. It's this statement, and I just figured out that if the lengths aren't equal, they are automatically equal, and so the rest of our code won't execute, and only that line of code would return the final results. So now the rest of the code is executing. Now the problem is that we have this check statement outside the inner for loop. So I moved it in and I'm getting true as a result. So I'm testing with several other strings, and here I'm saying a false positive. So MongoDB and MongoD, bMongoD should return true, but dMongoB shouldn't return true, but it is. So it's counting all the matches after the first match, not all the consecutive matches after the first match. So I have to have a case where I'm resetting the number of match counts after I find a mismatch. after the first match. So if the number of match counts is greater than 0 and we find a mismatch, at that case we want to reset the number of match counts. So let's see if we get true now. We don't. So I'm trying with other strings as well. Right? I'm getting false here. False, false. This time false negative. Now what's happening? Let's create some console logs. Alright, so it seems like the number of match counts doesn't go up at all now. Um, Now I'm trying to print the characters that are being compared further down in the code. So I'm trying to make it more readable. So here we find a match with M and M, but then we don't, at the next iteration we don't iterate, we don't count the matches. So what's happening here? So we are resetting the match count, I think, more than necessary, more like in at times that are not necessary. So and that is because we are trying to, if as soon as we find a match, we are trying to finish the inner loop before going to the next character in the outer loop. So what we want to happen is that we want to also iterate through the outer loop or the main string number 1 as soon as we find our first match. So I think we want to increment the I for the outer loop as soon as we find a match, but even if I do that, none of the matches are correctly being counted and added to the match count variable. So what can I do? What could be the cause? Um, I'm guessing that when we increment the I, as soon as we want to increment the match count, we don't we like we don't give a chance to that if statement to evaluate correctly, and we kind of mess up the evaluation process. So I'm converting this for loop to a while loop, and I extracted the I byte, and now I'm going to remove this I from, yeah, it's still not working. So I'm going to extract that I from the if statement and put it somewhere else just to make sure that that's really the case. That because we are incrementing the I in our if statement, we are messing it up. So yeah, that is the case. So I have to wait for that condition to evaluate, and then I can play with the I iterator. And I'm seeing a duplicate condition here, so I'm trying to create nested for loops just to not check something twice. So, and I'm having an unnecessary console log that I just removed. So I'm just checking the code again, and it seems to be working fine. But if now we gives like give the two strings in a way that they aren't matched, we are getting an error for the index being out of range. So I'm trying to create a condition down at the bottom to prevent that, to not increment the I outside the inner loop if it would cause an error. Because at that point we probably don't have enough iterations left over to increment match count enough times to make it equal to the length of string 1. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it.